Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Make Change Management Work in the Real World. My name is Tobias Schroeder. I'm an International Product and Market Manager here at SoftExpert. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Peter Hubbard, who is a Principal ITSM Consultant for Pink Elephant with more than 20 years of experience in ITSM. He has been involved in assisting organizations from national government to small-scale businesses understand their IT service management needs. I wish you all a great webinar.
Good morning. Welcome to Pink Elephant's latest broadcast. This session I wanted to talk about change management. In particular, what I wanted to talk about is the vast difference between learning the book's theory of what ITIL tells you should happen and actually having an effective change management process in the real world. Don't get me wrong, ITIL is a great starting point, but the number of times I've had to go to an organization to unjam them, that the root cause is somebody read the book but didn't know enough to be able to adapt it to the real world. So, welcome to everything that you've never been told about how to make change management work in the real world. A quick introduction for those of you who have yet to attend one of my many scintillating and interesting webinars. My name is Peter Hubbard. I'm a Principal IT Service Management Consultant for Pink Elephant. I have recently worked out that I have been working in service management for almost 20 years now, so I really must evaluate my life at some point. For anyone who's bumped into me at the industry events, such as the IT Service Management Forum or the Service Desk Institute, so again, a quick shout out, I'm talking about problem and incident management. Do we really need both? At the ITSMF in the UK at the back end of November. I've worked in all sorts of organisations, large and small, across all sorts of industry sectors, but still my proudest claim to fame is the fact that I convinced my good friend and co-worker to stand up and get pelted in the middle of an annual conference with plastic balls in the name of release management. Without further ado though, let's move on to change management in the real world. So, let's just clarify why you would want to have change management. Okay, so let's start with its value to the business. Now, there's about a page and a half. I went to go and look at the service transition book and said, what does change management do? What's the value for you when I was writing this? And there's about a page and a half of text, but what it comes down to is simple. Your biggest contribution in change management is to let the service provider, IT, to cope with higher volumes of change without breaking things. The main reason that change management exists is to increase the understanding of risk during and after that change. That's it. That's all you have change management for. But I'd like to pull out a couple of areas that some people seem to miss, judging from the way that they've set up their change management processes. Your job is to understand risk. It is to control risk. It is to mitigate risk. It is not to eliminate risk. There is exactly one way you can eliminate the risk of changing. Don't change. That's it. That is the only way that you can eliminate the risk of change. Unfortunately, you can't do that for very long before the organization will be in just as much trouble as if they hadn't actually, as if you had been doing the normal change controls. So I regard a competent change manager as something akin to a conductor. The one who understands the whole picture, knows what's going on, knows when to bring in and when to coordinate areas. So that's what we're aiming for, a competent change manager. Why do you get change management? Because poor change hurts. It hurts a lot. I just did a very quick search on that interweb thing we've all been hearing so much about from the young kids, and I just pulled up some famous names to say, is change really as important as all that? Well, here's 3 different stories I found within about 5 minutes of looking. So, Facebook managed to take itself down in September 2014 for only about 15 minutes, but when you're Facebook, that hurts. You see, Amazon managed to actually blow themselves up during some planned maintenance, and the Bank of America just doing some normal changes, managed to bring themselves down. But obviously, these are all quite minor, aren't they? It's not as if it really hurts. It's not as if it would really upset somebody if you did a poor change. For those of you watching from the UK, you may remember this from 2012. For those of you who are dialing in from overseas, the NatWest, the RBS in particular, to a lesser extent the Ulster Bank, are two of our 5 largest banks in the UK. In 2012, they actually managed to blow themselves up to an extent that it was about 3 weeks before people were able to work out what was actually in their accounts. Think about that. The whole point of having a bank is to have your money safely and securely looked after. For a period of about 2 to 3 weeks, a lot of customers in the tens of thousands were not able to access their money. It was huge. It was the lead story on the news day after day after day. I would direct your attention to the bottom paragraph. The problem began on Thursday. It's believed to have arisen after the staff tried to install a software update on RBS's payment processing system, but ended up corrupting it. It was a change. I invite you to do as I do. Whenever I see a news story with some famous brand organization appearing in the news talking about an IT outage, watch that story. Go back to it a day or 2 later. I guarantee you, 8 times out of 9, you're going to see a phrase very similar to that, saying, it was a change. Changes hurt. This one ended up costing them over £125 million. And that was in straightforward fines. That was straightforward money they had to pay out. Never mind loss of reputation. But at least they learned from it. Oh, here we go, March 2013. They did it again. Second time in 9 months, people could no longer access their accounts. Again, it was a change that actually performed this one. So, changes hurt. Okay, that's the threat. That's the risk. Well, let's see how change management looks in the real world. Okay, on the left, these are the things to look out for. If you can recognize these in your own organization, you might be having some problems. The things on the right is what you should be looking at yourself if you are a change manager. These are worry signs. Maybe you are the one that actually has the problem, but people don't want to tell it to you. The emperor's new clothes. You're naked, but no one wants to point it out, or doesn't know that they should point it out. So on the left, here are your quick forward warning signs if you're outside change looking in. If you cannot have a central view of all the changes occurring, warning. I must have a forward schedule of change. It is utterly critical. The main reason change management exists is to understand what changes are happening, when they're occurring, and what it's impacting. If I cannot find that out, I have an issue. I would also say the only way I can find that out is by having a wall of text grabbed out of a tool set I expect people to wade through. Not very good. Offer a good, clear, visual representation of what's going to happen and when. Unauthorized changes occurring. That should be an obvious one. If people either have so little respect for change, or change is so misunderstood and toothless people absolutely ignore it and nothing happens, warning. Unplanned outages. I worked with an organization recently who implemented a change freeze, running up to Christmas. They're just prepping themselves, getting ready for it. During that change freeze period, the amount of major incidents dropped 47%. Okay? Just think about that. 47% of their major incidents directly attributable to changes. And that was for a relatively short period. They're preparing to hunker down and do it for when Christmas proper. We're expecting a drastic drop in the amount of issues. If you see a high number of changes rush through at the last minute, okay, I raised a change an hour ago, I want to do it in another hour. Warning. You need the ability to stand back and look at something to say, well, hang on, what is this? Okay, if most of your changes going through qualify as an emergency change, you do not have a change process. What you have is a speed bump that people will just vroom over. Projects. If the project handover can be best summarized as catch, yours now, that is a worrying sign. The change process is not working. If change doesn't even talk to projects, even worse. That should be where most of their workload's coming from. If I say a simple question, how many changes did you have last month and how many went through successfully? The response being, I don't know, and some, or even worse, I don't know, all of them were successful. Big, big warning. Okay? Changes tend to break things. Changes cause ripples. Changes cause issues. If your technical team's view of change is, we're actually okay here, none of our changes cause incidents, you've got one of two things in your IT department. Either the best technical team anyone has seen ever in the entire world who have managed to buck the probability that every other organization faces on a daily basis, or you haven't closed the loop and gone back to tell people what the issues caused by changes are. So those are the things to look out for from the outside point of view. Possibly if you're listening in, you are a change manager and you'd like to know, well, what should I be looking out for? Here are your own internal warning signs. If technical people are unclear when a change is needed or when it's not, warning. Okay? If people don't even know when they're supposed to come and talk to you, they're going to opt not to talk to you and say, I didn't know that I had to. If you look at the amount of paperwork that people have to fill in order to do the smallest thing, warning. Okay? This means that you are a bureaucratic process. I don't like interacting with you and I will actively try to avoid you. A certain element of paperwork is absolutely mandatory, no problem. But what I would like change to do is try to work to eliminate unneeded paperwork. If the CAB meeting is regarded as a technical torture chamber, I have gone to several organizations to help them sort out. CAB is the most visible face of change. That's what most people think change management is, that weekly meeting. If the weekly meeting descends into 10 people or 15 people sitting on a conference bridge or sitting in a room, bored out of their mind, while two techies go backwards and forwards like a game of tennis, trying to show off their technical skills, and nobody else can understand or know what's happening, warning, your change process is broken. If you do not have a visible way to add value leading to a poor perception of change, if you can't prove what you're doing is making it better, warning. Your process by default is going to be bureaucratic. Your process is actually involved in slowing down technical people to think about what they're doing to make sure stuff doesn't blow up. You are 9 times out of 10 going to be automatically seen as, if not the enemy, then the bureaucrat to work around. If you have nothing to be able to demonstrate that what you're doing adds value, I would try to work around you as well. Here's another one. If your approvers of changes are more or less random or simply gone with the, okay, I know Bill, Bob and Fred are nice, they're moderately senior, I'll get them to approve things approach, warning. Technical people are not dumb. They're probably smarter than we are. They are, after all, very, very good at making fiddly bits of technology actually work. I haven't got a clue how to do that. If I'm asking a technical person to go and get permission from someone who they don't understand or say, why is that person commenting and approving on my work that I'm the expert on, they're not going to buy into this. It will be an exercise in their minds of rubber stamping, pointless and can be ignored. And if you quite simply can't answer the simple question of, what was your success rate? If I implement a change, what are my chances of it going through without causing something painful? And you cannot answer me that question, I'm really quite worried about you. So that's change management in the wild. Now, Let's talk turkey in the real world. What do you do about that? If you've recognized yourself in any of those areas, now what? Now, what I'm about to do is take the basics that ITIL gives you, and let's be honest, they're pretty good basics, but they are called that for a reason. They're the basics. And talk to you about how to actually expand and assist your organization. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through most of the pain points that I see in organizations that have change management as it goes through its change life cycle. I'm going to call out what the pain points are, and I'm going to give you some suggestions about what to do about them. Here's my first one. Before we go anywhere near the change process, put this picture up in front of you. Work out the focus of your change process, because it massively influences everything you're about to do. You have two ends. You have agility or speed. You have safety, compliance. Very carefully, and probably with some thought and going back to the business, and especially if you've got regulatory and compliance on there, work out where you are on that seesaw. Are you moving towards more agility? In which case, there are things you could be doing that you shouldn't be doing if you are on the safety side. What that means is the level of risk that you're willing to accept has gone up. If, on the other hand, you are a highly risk-averse organization, there are certain things that you should not be doing. So, standard changes, for example, I would put on the agility side, not that far into it, because I really want standard changes. We'll be discussing those later. Change lead times, I might have longer lead times if I'm on the safety side of it. So the very first thing you do before you decide anything further in your change process is work out which side are you on. If you're trying to actually have an agile and safe process, I hope some of these tips help. If you manage to find a way to respond to change requests quickly and safely all the time, please let me know how you've managed to do that. I've been trying for nearly 20 years. Change equals risk. Let's control the risk. This is a very simple run-through according to ITIL of the high levels of the change process activities. All of you who I'm sure have read ITIL cover to cover, Service Transition, what a fascinating read that is, will recognize all of these steps to initiate. You should initiate the request for change. You filter it, assess it, categorize and approve it, you implement it, you review it. What I'm going to do is walk through and call out, it's not going to do every single step, but I'm going to call out the pain points that I most commonly encounter and give you some suggestions about how to address them. As we go through this, please do feel free to ask questions. I'll leave some time at the end, but if you have a question as we're going through, please do just type it in and ask. So, let's start with the first point, initiating a change. This is where I believe ITIL is actively harmful. Okay? The formal definition of a change in ITIL is the addition, modification, or removal of anything that could have an effect on an IT service. All right, I can get that. First question, just out of interest, all the people listening in, just have a think, have you defined what your IT services are? Are they clearly understood? Have you written them down? Do you have a catalogue? Because if you haven't taken that step, telling the technical people the definition of a change is something that could impact something I haven't told you about. Right, that's a good start. I now automatically think that you and change are insane, and I don't know when I'm supposed to talk to you. ITIL then carries on. The scope of change management should include changes to all architecture, processes, tools, metrics, documentation, IT service, and configuration items. So that makes a change everything. Does it? Now, I'm being a bit hard on ITIL here, and I'm using it to make a point. ITIL is a great starting point. What it's giving you is exactly that, the starting point. The following things could require you to manage them with a change process. If you blindly pick that up out of the book and put it onto your organization without thinking about it, you are trying to defend everything. Well, Frederick the Great, he who defends everything defends nothing. Change is risk. What we need to do is focus the attention on the areas of highest risk to make sure that those are controlled. I'll take hits in the little areas, just so long as it's not in the big areas. So here's my definition of what a change is. My personal definition is any non-pre-approved modification, maintenance, or monitoring activity taking place on an in-scope item. Modification for the purposes of this definition includes installation and removal. What I'm in effect saying is if you touch anything within the scope that I have called out, which is the next slide set, I want to see you from change management. I've got a question that's popped up. Who do you recommend to fill in the RFC, the customer or the subject matter expert? Good question. I believe that multiple people should be filling in the RFC. If I take it from the business and then walk it through, I'll tell you who I believe should be involved. In my personal fantasy, what would happen is the business person who has the requirement engages with the relevant technical person. They could have been shunted that way by raising a request at the service desk and the technician calls them back to discuss. It could have come through business relationship management. The business person will explain their requirements to the technical, the subject matter expert. That person will translate and write down. So to start off with, I believe the subject matter expert should put pen to paper. Doesn't always happen. And if the business is savvy enough to begin with that, I'm perfectly happy. The subject matter expert puts it in and says, here's what I want to do. They pass it to change management, who double checks, as I talk in a bit, about does that make sense. It then moves on to other areas and other people get involved. If I could only pick one area, customer or SME, I would pick SME. It's IT's job to know how to handle this. It's not the business's. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Right. So, making sure people know when to engage. I always offer examples of changes. Obvious things, server installation, network router modifications. I bring out areas people might not consider. Changes to service level agreements. If you want to alter that, that's a change request. That one slips some people by. They're saying, excuse me, that's a document. Why do I need a change? Because that document alters how my IT department works. If you raise a change that says we now offer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week support, I'd like the techies who have to offer that support to have a chance to comment, please. When you're defining your change, always ask yourself the question, does fixing an incident require a change? There is no correct answer. I honestly don't care. What it comes back down to is that seesaw I showed you at the beginning. Are you after speed or are you after safety? Okay, just answer the question. If a server has broken, it has fallen over. Am I allowed to fix that server and bring it back up under an incident record? Or do I require that an incident record log a request for change, even an emergency one, and bring it back up? ITIL's suggested response is it goes through change. In your world, I don't care. What is it you're looking for? Make sure people know. I would also say if you have a blanket response of all incidents must have changes happening, go and find out how many incidents you've just let yourself in for. What's the workload you just signed up for? So, I made sure that any non-pre-approved modification, maintenance or monitoring activity taking place on in-scope item, always make sure you define the scope in very simple, easy to understand terms. I actually put this up on posters where the technical people sit. What's the definition of a change? If you're doing anything of that, my definition, to anything here, services, servers, debt, and so on and so on and so on, with these as examples, change management wants to talk to you. Okay? I find that works a lot easier for the business, the technical teams to know, oh, I'm touching one of those, I should go and talk to change management. So, make sure your definitions and scopes are nice and simple. Don't forget, simply because I said I want to change, it doesn't mean it has to go through the full-on change process. I did mention standard changes earlier on. Okay, standard changes are a godsend, and I see them happen so rarely. It's like people think that this is just a little tweak on the side, useful but not especially relevant. They're not. Okay, these are key. This is the difference between life and death of your change management process. I task my change managers to actively hunt for changes to become standard. When I see that a change has happened more than 3 or 4 times and it's gone through, it was low risk, it didn't have any impact, and it was pulled off 3 times successfully, I actively task them to promote it to standard change. Make sure you have a clear definition of what are standard changes and a way of approving them. I normally suggest, once you identify a standard change, go to the person who raises it, ask them to complete the form once, along with associated artifacts such as backout plan, testing, and so on and so on. Take that change to CAB and say, we have a standard change candidate. Please, everyone, shred it. If everyone in CAB looks at that and says, we're fine with it, I now take it to my tool support and say, please build me a model that says that this change happens. I want it to happen on the click of a button. The only question I wanted to ask is what exactly are you doing it on? Link it to my CI, and when are you planning to do it? And that's it. About the only carrot that change management gets is the ability to remove overhead in terms of administration, bureaucracy. We have plenty of sticks. I can yell at you. I can probably even get you fired if you make unauthorized changes. But the only carrot that we have is to say, if you follow my process, I can make sure that you sitting there and filling in all those forms happens at the click of a button. We've worked out in advance what happens. You bring up your list. It says standard change 7, antivirus patch update. Click the button, associate it to the CIs, tell me when it's happening, and away you go. Standard changes are key. If you haven't got any in your change process, you should be actively hunting for them. They are a really, really good carrot to bring technicians into the change process. You know all that admin that you hate? I can automate it for you. Okay, so that's the initiate section. Make sure people know when to engage. Make sure that you can take away administration that's not actively useful. Let's look at the filtering session. This is by far one of the most dangerous areas. I refer to this as change admin, and this is where the change managers really don't help themselves with our image that we have. What you're supposed to be doing is making sure that enough information is in the change record for those people who touch it to understand what's going on. You are not there to demand war and peace, okay? I want enough information to say, I get what you're doing, I see why you're doing it, I can see what you're doing it to, I see what you'll do if there's if you need to do a back out, and I see how you're going to do testing. All right, let's go and see if it's a good idea. A really good way of losing respect for your change process quickly is to sit there and demand information that is not being used. If there is no reason for field X to be filled in, and you're demanding that you have to have information about it, then people are going to hate you. You are the fun police. What on earth do you think you're doing here? Every now and again, show that you're paying attention. If someone attaches a backout plan, have a look at it. Does it make sense? Come back with a question. How long would it take? Under what conditions would you invoke that? What happened the last time you tried this? What you're actually doing is reassuring the technical people that the information that they have been that you have provided is actually useful. Sending a change back going rejected, no back out plan, a technician then writes a back out plan, attaches it to the change with a blank document, and then you approve it. You've just shown yourself to be a soulless automaton and the enemy of all that is good and true. Please make sure you recognize that your job here is to make sure everything is ready for those who need to engage with the change, not to make people jump through hoops with no point. Don't make mountains out of molehills. Here's my next pain point, and it's my gold star pain point. If you can only fix one area, this is the one to go to. It is the change assessment. If you get this right, your change process comes up leaps and bounds. You get this wrong, and you become a bureaucratic quagmire that everybody hates interacting with. Okay? Now, as you all know, I have three basic types of change. I'm not going into the emergency and so on just yet. We will call them minor, significant, and major. Good practice, minor changes get signed off by change management, significant goes to CAB, major changes goes to CAB, IT exec board, and potentially up into the business board to say, this is really big. The problem is that most tool sets that I see don't offer the level of help that's needed. They work on the same assumption as for an incident. I ask them the impact, I ask them the urgency, I ask them impact, I ask them risk, and what I'm not doing is I'm saying to technical people, do you believe it's low, medium, or high impact? Do you believe it's low, medium, or high risk? And based on that information alone, they are supposed to pick what the appropriate level is. Now, even if the person you're dealing with is a genius who gets it right every single time, what that means is you're getting 50 to 100 people, all your technical people's opinion of what they think the levels of risk are. If you have not done something to help them quantify and classify that risk, why are you surprised that you're getting changes skipping past CAB that should have gone there? I thought it was low risk. No, it was huge. Didn't you know that? Oh, no, I didn't know that. So, I don't like those. I normally create something like this. Takes you 15 minutes in an Excel spreadsheet, and I normally see if I can get it translated into the tool set itself. What I do is I come up with a risk assessment form. I bring up the criteria, and I say, this is what I'm asking you to assess from. Whenever you raise a change, please go through and fill it in. It takes you 30 seconds. How many users are you impacting? How many services are you affecting on this? How many resources are required to implement this? And it goes off the page. There's only so much I could fit on here. Very simple Excel spreadsheet. Put your points in here, spits it out on the top. If you hit 11 to 20, you're minor, 21 to 35, significant, more than 35, major. Do tweak that, make sure you get it right. I also offer examples of what I consider to be minor, significant, and major. What that means is I now have a standard way of classifying my changes. If I'm very risk averse and say, actually we're coming up to an important period, I don't want to take as many risks, guess what? I can alter my risk assessment formula. Actually, if it's 11 to 17, you're minor, I'm actually a bit more risk averse in this area. I want more stuff to go to CAB. If you don't get this area right, you are in such trouble, because I now have 50 to 100 or 15 to 10 or 1 to 5 different views on what they consider to be areas of risk. The job of change management is to focus the attention on high areas of risk. If I'm having 100 splintered views about what they think the high areas of risk are, oh my lord, I'm in trouble. I do urge you to create one of these things yourselves. They take very little time. You can start out with a straightforward, attach it to my change tool, and then once it's accepted, get some work done, have it put in. I want a button on my change tool that says perform risk assessment. I push the button, this pops up, I go click, click, clickety-click, and the tool sets itself. You are a significant change. You need CAB. Which leads me on to the assessment and lead time. One of the most misunderstood and hated areas, after the administration area I spoke about, is change lead time. So the first question is, do you want changed lead times? Remember that little seesaw at the beginning? Go back to that. What are you after, agility or safety? Change lead time is there to allow people, approvers, time to review and approve it. Okay? If you're a global organization and I've got someone raising a change that I need the input from EMEA, Asia Pac, and the West Coast of the Americas from, the person raises it and wants to do the work in 20 minutes. Half the people who need to approve it are in bed? No. So I always set expectations. Guys, if it's a minor change, I need 3 days notice. Now this is where you need to start having some intelligence coming through. Is it 3 days, but if everyone approves before time, you can go ahead? Is it 3 days, but if you don't know what happens if people don't approve this? The change assessment lead time is the biggest rallying cry for people when they say change is bureaucracy gone mad. I wanted to do this on Friday. I raised it on Monday. Why can't I get it done? I took it to CAB, but I've still got one person who hasn't assessed this. There is no correct answer. All I can tell you is go back to that seesaw. Are you about speed? Are you about safety? My personal belief is if it's been to CAB and CAB signed it off, there was someone else who hasn't attended CAB who is also supposed to sign it off. It's the job of change to hunt that person down and say, what's going on? This person has followed my process. You're holding them up. What's happening? But that is completely up to your internal organization. Do make sure that if you give something like a major change 10 days notice, you be very, very explicit about what you mean by a major change. I've worked in organizations where I said I want 10 days notice of a major change, and they were up in arms and down in legs. They said, you're insane. I don't plan that far in front. I said, guys, a definition of a major change is something like I'm moving your data center. Are you seriously telling me you only give yourself 10 days notice if you're about to move your data center? You should know about this weeks, months in advance. And that's the problem. That's the area where, because people haven't had that guidance about what is it that makes a change minor, significant, major, they start to project and say, I can't ask 10 days notice for installing a server. Please fill out that form, installing the server. What does it come out as? Oh, it comes out as minor. I don't need 10 days notice. I need 3, and that's to allow Bill and Fred, who are in Australia, to approve it, and it's the weekend for them. Make sure you engage. Make sure people understand why you're asking these things. Please make sure you have a clear definition of emergency change. If you do not have a definition of what's an emergency, every single change will be an emergency. This is my definition. The change is unplanned and unforeseen. It's got a business critical impact. It's significant or major. You cannot have a minor emergency change. It's got to go through prior to the next CAB. And the final thing, all the people in the, I just noticed I spelled emergency wrong. Sorry, in the last line. All the people in the CAB EC, the CAB Emergency Committee, have agreed that yes, this genuinely is an emergency. What this means is you are now giving the implicit assumption that the CAB EC can reject changes. And a lot of people are worried about that. They're saying, well, hang on, what do I do when someone brings me a change? It doesn't quite meet my criteria, but it means that if I reject it, I'm going to get shelled at by the business. If you don't admit that and pull it out straight in front of you, that's what's going to happen. I don't want to pick on project managers, but I'm gonna, because they tend to do that. They wait to the last minute, then say, oh, by the way, I've got a change going through tomorrow. Forgot to tell you about it. Really sorry, but you can't say no, the business is expecting it. What am I supposed to do? Do I stand up and say, no, according to the rules, this should have been 10 days notice or 5 days notice? I look like a petty tin tyrant. So how do I address that? Plan for your process to be broken. It's that simple, guys, and I hope some ladies too. If your process cannot be broken, it will shatter. Your change process is there to protect you. They are in effect shields. Who's the only person allowed to drop the shields? What you need to do is say who is empowered to say except in this case. My personal preference is CIO. This is, after all, their IT department. This person is running risk through it because they didn't follow the process. If the boss tells me I'll take the hit, I will drop all shields and do my level best to ram it straight through. But I don't want this to be a pleasant or a routine area. Before I just talk a bit more about that, I'm just going to finish off a section on emergency changes. If you say what a emergency change is, please don't forget to say what special powers it gets. Okay? Change documentation can happen respectively, but has to happen within 24 hours. Testing happens afterwards. No, you don't skip testing. If you just lob this thing out, I want you to, once it's out there, go back and test to say, is there anything we've forgotten? You don't get to skip it, thank you. And automatically, all emergency changes should have a post-implementation review. My CAB EC, a quick thought on that. If you have a major incident manager, they should be involved. Here's my straightforward policy. If it's a break fix, remember I said, does an incident require a change? Then the major incident manager should be at the emergency change advisory board, plus whoever else. If it's a business requirement, it goes to the full ECAB chaired by change management. Out of hours, that's the OOH, it's break fix only. If you're going to hand the major incident manager the power of change management, don't forget to train them. This is on the assumption that you do not have a dedicated change management team working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've seen that happen so often, where organisations say that the change manager must convene an emergency CAB, and the change manager is one person who clears off home at 5 o'clock. There will be someone making sure things are going at all hours in IT. Make sure that person is aware of the processes to follow, when to say yes, when to say no. It's what happens anyway, you may as well support them. Let's move back on to what to do with those changes that get crammed in at the last minute. The ones where, I'm not going to say they deliberately fail to follow the change process, but for some reason or other, they've managed to maneuver so that your only choice is let it go through my emergency change process or stand up and be seen as unhelpful by the business. I came up with a new change category. I refer to it as unplanned. Unplanned is what I use when I have been forced to use my emergency change process, but it didn't meet the criteria of an emergency change. So, where I've had my hand forced, it was a business requirement that the project knew about but didn't raise it, or a technician should have raised the change weeks ago but forgot, or any area like that, I have the option of unplanned. It follows exactly the same process as emergency change, but it gets a little button that says unplanned. And I say, that change must be authorized by the relevant team manager. So if a technician has just pushed through an emergency change, I want his boss to know that he did it as an unplanned one. So I want his boss to sort of look at him with a hard stare. Once it goes through, the change manager should say, okay, what else have you broken? Why was it unplanned? And I actually formally call out unplanned changes as a separate area. I break them down by team. I even name and shame individuals. I even had a policy at one organisation I was assisting that the head of IT said, if you've done an unplanned change, you have to come to see me the following morning to explain why you felt the need to wreck my IT department. Took about 3 weeks of the technicians lining up outside his office to get yelled at every morning before they realised, oh, they're serious about this, and the amount of unplanned changes dropped drastically. Always allow yourself that safety valve. There will be occasions when it's not an emergency, but you can't say no. Accept it, carry on with it, but don't make it a pleasant experience for those doing it. You are trying to educate and say, These change processes here to protect the organisation, and you're raising risk unnecessarily. Still with the approvals, let's talk about the CAB, the technical torture chamber. A few thoughts on this if you're a change manager. This is a meeting. Learn how to run meetings. There's pages, books of stuff on this. Okay? Simply sitting there quietly while two technical guys bounce backwards and forwards over an obscure technical point. Your job as meeting manager, the chair, remember that, is to step in. Learn to read the room. Look around. If everybody else is doing email, not paying attention, has mentally checked out, give them a couple of minutes. The job of the CAB is to tease out these sorts of things. If there's no end in sight, say, guys, there's obviously an issue with this. Let's move this offline. Moving on. Your job as the chair is not to sit passively, but to actively move a meeting along. It is a very important meeting. If you're doing a CAD, you probably have between 5 and 15, I have some CADs with 20 to 30 technical representatives, sometimes quite high level, dialing in or turning up for up to an hour. Okay? That means I have 20 to 30 man-hours of attention coming into my meeting. If I turn up with a, hello, what are we going to talk about? They lose all respect for me. Do your homework. The CAB agenda goes out the day before. This is what we're going to talk about. Review all the changes. Make sure you have questions to ask about them. This is a formal meeting. I want it run like one. Okay? Move it along. Create actions. Assign them. Don't, if you are a change manager, don't try and keep actions going yourself. Your job is to keep the meeting moving. You should have a post I call the CAB recorder. Their job is to take the actions and note down. If you try and do this yourself, you are going to grind that meeting to a halt. 1 second, 1 minute, let me just see if I can capture that, and you lose the flow. Be nice. If there's a project office who's coming in to talk about their change, schedule that change first. When that person's done, let them leave. Don't make them sit till the end. Look around to see what other tools you can grab up and bring in. If you've got a CMDB and someone does a change, the job of the change of the CAB recorder potentially is while you're talking, open up the CMDB on the WebEx on the screen in the room, bring up the item and visually show everybody else what's attached to it. Bring up your service catalog. Hang on, your change will impact this service. Bring up the catalog. Okay, that service underpins the following. Have we thought about the? Your job is to provide enough information for everybody else to have a look at and go, yeah, okay, I can see what the impact is. Use those tools. I really want problem management as participants. The root cause of most of my issues come from people not following processes or not understanding what the impact was when they did something. I actually give problem management their own slot, and I ask them to report on issues caused by changes in the previous week. This means problem management can stand up and say, last week we had 18 changes, of which 2 caused following major incidents. We've done this, here's what we've learned. Everyone aware. It's not a witch hunt, so you have to be careful with it, but what you're doing is closing the loop. Changes cause pain, let's all be aware. There are people out there, we're supposed to protect them. All right, I'm coming towards the end now, so if anyone has any questions, now's your time to start writing them. So, having implemented your changes, please review them. ITIL says you should review every change. Are you kidding me? How much time do you think I have? Sure, I'll just turn around to my team of 47 change analysts and get them on that one for me. My policy, every emergency change gets reviewed, because those things hurt. Every failed change gets reviewed, because I want to know why they failed and what I could learn. Every major change gets reviewed, because you shouldn't have many of those and they were big. And I'll sample review the rest, enough to let people know that yes, I do look into this. Telling them I review every single change, you've got to be kidding me. Asking them to review their own changes without letting them know that you will be sample checking is an invitation for people to say, it was all fine, moving on. If you're going to have that step, let them know that you care. But always, always make time to review at least some changes. The only way you're actually going to learn and find out what's going on and what you can do differently. If you're going to talk about change management, you've got to be able to prove your value. These are my suggestions. This is what I normally look to see in terms of measurements after you've, for the health of your change process. Mean time to approve per category. Performance, how quickly. Are you a blocking point? If it takes on average 15 days to get a change approved, what's gone wrong? Numbers of incidents caused by changes. Quality. It would be lovely to be able to see that. I'll be honest with you, you probably haven't got that level of sophistication. Simple one. Talk to the major incident managers and problem management. Could you please put a tick box on your forms that you fill out after there's a major incident? The simple, this was change related. So it lets me pick up where the issues were. Percent of changes successful. If you cannot tell me what your success rate is, I do question what you're doing here. Percent reduction in emergency and unplanned changes. Look, I'm getting people off the back foot and actually having them planning ahead about what's going on. This is brilliant. And of course, the number of changes broken down by category tells you how busy you are. What's your workload? If the only thing you're reporting on is the number of changes, that just tells me you're busy. I can't see if you're useful, and I can't see if there's any point to what you're doing. So, think about what you want to, the story you want to tell people, and make sure you have the measurements to back it up. This is where you're going to get your kudos from. Make sure you can talk about it. So, I'm hoping that there have been some tips and tricks, some suggestions that might help you guys out. But this is my final, I believe, slide. So, what should change management look like? Minimize unnecessary admin. Okay? Never keep a dog and bark yourself. The tool set has the ability to automate things. If people have to fill in the same fields, the same information every single time, automate the flipping thing. You should reduce risks and minimize impact while making sure that people realize that risks and impact still occur. Okay? Again, the only carrot that you get in IT is to reduce admin. Make sure you take advantage of that. You've got to be seen to increase change success rate. If I can't say that following this process has made it better by X amount, people will ignore it. Think about it. If I follow the process, it makes the job easier for you, the change manager. If I do my own way of working, it makes it easier for me, the technician. I can't see the benefit because you're not telling me what the benefits are. Why on earth would I want to follow your process? So, I'm starting to see some questions arrive. I'll finish with the golden rules, then we'll open this up for 5 minutes or so about questions. So, service management, my golden rules for change. Change management without standard change is inexcusable. It will fail. It's that simple. You are now a clog. You are now somewhere that people have to fill things out by hand every time they want to talk to you. Actively work to reduce administration, okay? You have an ITSM toolset that automates things, at least I hope you do. Try to take advantage of it. Bring donuts to CAB. Seriously, that is a good way to get people, one, showing up to your change advisory board. I recognize it doesn't work if it's an online meeting, but let's assume that you have a big room with people and others dial in. I actually made sure when I was doing change management, I sent someone out or went out myself to buy donuts or something for that meeting every single week. It made sure that technical people turned up. It made sure they were in a good mood. And basically, if you want to actually get people to do something in IT, bribe them with donuts or chocolate. Tends to work. Have change training as part of your IT staff onboarding. Volunteer your time to say, hey, look, I will actually train your staff at set periods in how to use the service management tool set. Because what that means is from the very first day that they join your organization and are taught how to use the ITSM tool set, you start indoctrinating them on this is how to raise changes. This is why it's important. Very key area to get hold of. Problem management are your eyes and ears. You are not going to find out about failed changes anywhere near as often as they will, because it's their job to dig in to say, well, why did that happen? Don't forget to include in your reviews, was it a failure of a process, a way of working, not just technology? If all you're doing is looking at, well, okay, the technology seems to have failed, and therefore you won't pick up nearly enough as to say, well, what happened is there wasn't a good handover between the two shifts when you left. Talk to your service desk. They are the first ones to notice when it's raining. Okay, when a change goes bang, they're the ones who tend to get swamped. And I'm really not kidding about those donuts, okay? Take them to CAB. Give yourself a good reputation. People will come and talk to you a lot more. Thanks very much, everybody. I hope you all have a good day, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Goodbye.
Thanks to all of you who took part in this presentation. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch with Mr. Hubbard, please email him at p.hubbard@pinkelephant.co.uk. For more webinars, please visit our website www.softexpert.com. See you next time.